In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death whispers through every canyon and survival depends on split-second decisions, a group of elite Navy SEALs found themselves face-to-face with someone they thought was just another local fighter. Little did they know, they were about to meet a woman whose reputation had become legend among insurgent forces. A ghost who could take out targets from distances that seemed impossible, whose very name struck fear into the hearts of those who threatened her homeland. What started as a routine encounter would soon become a life-or-death situation that would test everything these highly trained warriors believed about courage, skill, and the unexpected places where heroes are born. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a room isn't who you expect, and sometimes that person becomes your greatest ally when everything goes wrong. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her scope for the third time in 10 minutes. The Afghan mountains stretched endlessly before her, their peaks disappearing into clouds that seemed to touch the very edge of the world. She had been in this position for over 6 hours, waiting for the right moment, the perfect shot that would change everything. Maria wasn't supposed to be here. According to military protocol, female soldiers weren't officially allowed in direct combat roles, but war had a way of breaking rules when survival was on the line. Her commanding officers had learned to look the other way when it came to Maria's unconventional assignments. Her skills were simply too valuable to waste on paperwork and regulations. Growing up in a small border town in Texas, Maria had learned to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her father, a former Marine, had taught her that precision wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about patience, breathing, and understanding the world around you in ways most people never would. Every weekend, they would head out to the desert, where he would set up targets at distances that seemed impossible for a young girl to hit. "Remember, Mija," he would say in his quiet voice, "a good shot isn't about the gun. It's about knowing yourself and knowing your target better than they know themselves." Those lessons had stayed with her through basic training, through advanced sniper school, and now through 3 tours of duty in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Maria had earned a reputation that preceded her wherever she went. Fellow soldiers spoke of her in hushed tones, sharing stories that seemed too incredible to be true. They said she could hit a target from over a mile away in a sandstorm. They said she had once taken out an entire enemy position without them ever knowing where the shots were coming from. But the stories the enemy told about her were different. In the villages scattered throughout the mountains, insurgent fighters would warn newcomers about the ghost sniper, a phantom who could be anywhere and nowhere, who could end your life before you even knew you were being hunted. They had given her a name in their own language that roughly translated to the silent death, though Maria herself had never heard it spoken aloud. On this particular morning, Maria's mission was straightforward but crucial. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target would be moving through the valley below sometime before noon. This wasn't just any target. This was someone whose capture could provide information that might save hundreds of American lives and bring them one step closer to ending their involvement in this endless conflict. As she lay prone on the rocky outcropping, her rifle steady against the natural depression in the stone, Maria thought about the letter she had received from home the week before. Her younger brother had been accepted into the Marines and would be shipping out for basic training in 2 months. The pride in her mother's voice during their last phone call had been unmistakable, but Maria had also heard something else, fear. The radio crackled softly in her ear, bringing her back to the present moment. "Viper 1, this is Eagle's Nest. Target is approximately 15 minutes out from your position. Confirm your status." Maria pressed the transmit button on her throat mic. "Eagle's Nest, this is Viper 1. Position secure, visibility excellent. I have eyes on the approach route and am ready to engage." "Copy that, Viper 1. Remember, we need this one alive if possible. Disable the vehicle, but keep the package intact." "Understood. Viper 1 out." Maria smiled slightly at the irony of her call sign. Her fellow soldiers had started calling her Viper after a particularly successful mission where she had eliminated 7 targets in rapid succession from a concealed position. The name had stuck, though Maria preferred to think of herself simply as someone doing her job. As she waited, Maria ran through her mental checklist one more time. Wind speed and direction, minimal, coming from the northeast at approximately 3 miles per hour. Temperature, rising, which would affect the trajectory slightly. Distance to target area, 1,247 meters, well within her effective range. Backup plan. If the primary target wasn't in the expected vehicle, she had secondary positions already mapped out for pursuit. The valley below remained quiet except for the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Maria had learned to appreciate these moments of stillness before action. They reminded her why she did this work, not for glory or recognition, but because she was genuinely good at it, and her skills could make the difference between her fellow soldiers coming home safe or not coming home at all. A flash of movement caught her attention. Through her scope, she could see dust rising from the dirt road that wound through the valley floor. 3 vehicles moving in convoy formation, exactly as intelligence had predicted. Maria adjusted her position slightly, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the moment of truth. The lead vehicle was an old Toyota pickup truck, its bed loaded with what appeared to be supplies. The second vehicle was where her target would be, a slightly newer SUV with tinted windows. The third vehicle brought up the rear, another pickup with several armed men visible in the back. As the convoy drew closer, Maria began her breathing exercises, slowing her heart rate and steadying her hands. Everything else faded away. The heat of the sun on her back, the uncomfortable press of rocks against her body, the distant sounds of military activity from the base camp miles away. There was only the scope, the target, and the mathematics of making an impossible shot look routine. Eagle's Nest, this is Viper 1. Target acquired. 3 vehicles as expected. I have a clear shot on the engine block of the primary vehicle. Confirmed, Viper 1. You are cleared to engage on your discretion. Maria lined up her shot carefully. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to disable. A well-placed shot to the engine block would stop the vehicle without necessarily harming the occupants. From there, the ground team could move in to secure the target while Maria provided overwatch. But as she prepared to squeeze the trigger, something unexpected happened. The middle vehicle suddenly veered off the main road, taking a path that would lead it directly toward a cluster of buildings that intelligence had assured her would be empty. Through her scope, Maria could see why the change in direction. There were people in those buildings. Civilians who weren't supposed to be there. This changed everything. If the convoy was heading toward those buildings, it could mean one of 2 things. Either her target was planning to use civilians as human shields, or there was something in those buildings that her target needed. Either way, it was no longer a simple matter of disabling a vehicle on an empty road. Maria immediately got on the radio. Eagle's Nest, be advised. Target has diverted from expected route and is approaching the cluster of buildings at grid coordinates 77 Alpha. I have visual on what appear to be civilians in the area. The response came back quickly, but with tension evident in the voice. Viper 1, maintain your position and continue mission parameters. Ground team is adjusting approach route. But even as she acknowledged the transmission, Maria knew that the situation was becoming more complex by the minute. Through her scope, she watched as the convoy approached the buildings. Armed men were jumping out of the vehicles before they had even come to a complete stop. Whatever was happening down there wasn't going according to anyone's plan. That's when she saw him, a figure in American military uniform running between the buildings, clearly in distress. Even at this distance, Maria could tell that this was one of their own, and he was in serious trouble. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Somehow, an American soldier had ended up in the middle of what was supposed to be a routine takedown operation. The radio exploded with chatter as other elements of the mission team began reporting contact with enemy forces. What had been planned as a surgical strike was rapidly turning into a firefight, and Maria found herself in the unique position of being the only friendly asset with clear visibility of the entire situation. All stations, this is Eagle's Nest. We have American personnel in contact with enemy forces at the target location. Viper 1, we need you to provide immediate overwatch and support for extraction. Maria's training kicked in automatically. The original mission parameters were now secondary to the immediate need to protect American lives. She began identifying threats and prioritizing targets, her scope moving smoothly from position to position as she assessed the tactical situation below. The enemy fighters had spread out among the buildings with practiced efficiency, and Maria could see that they had definitely been expecting some kind of confrontation. This wasn't a routine convoy moving through the area. This was a trap, and somehow an American soldier had walked right into it. Through her scope, Maria watched as the situation continued to deteriorate. The American soldier was pinned down behind a low stone wall, with enemy fighters closing in from 3 different directions. The ground team was still several minutes away, and by the time they arrived, it might be too late. Maria made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. Abandoning her original position, she began moving along the ridge line, looking for angles that would allow her to engage the enemy fighters without risking harm to the trapped American. It was dangerous. By moving, she was exposing herself to potential counter-sniper fire, but staying in her original position would mean watching helplessly as a fellow soldier was captured or killed. As she settled into a new firing position, Maria could see more clearly what was happening below. The American soldier appeared to be a special operations team leader, based on his equipment and the way he was moving. But he was outnumbered at least 10-1, and his ammunition was clearly running low. Maria's first shot took out an enemy fighter who had been attempting to flank the American's position from a left. The sound of her rifle echoed off the canyon walls, and immediately the tactical situation below changed as the enemy fighters realized they were now being engaged by a sniper. Her second shot eliminated another threat, this one from a fighter who had been moving in from the right. Maria was already adjusting her position again, knowing that the enemy would be trying to locate her firing position and respond accordingly. The radio crackled in her ear. Viper 1, this is Eagle's Nest. Outstanding work. Continue providing overwatch. Ground team is inbound. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes. 4 minutes might as well have been 4 hours in a situation like this. Maria knew that she needed to keep the enemy fighters suppressed and disorganized until help arrived. But she also knew that every shot she took revealed more about her position, making her increasingly vulnerable to return fire. As she lined up her third shot, Maria reflected on something her father had told her years ago during one of their desert shooting sessions. Sometimes, Mija, being a good shot means knowing when not to shoot. But when the time comes to pull that trigger, you better be ready to live with whatever happens next. Looking through her scope at the chaos unfolding below, Maria knew that this was one of those moments when not shooting wasn't an option. There was an American soldier down there who was counting on her, even though he didn't know she existed. And she was going to make sure he made it home. The enemy fighters were getting smarter. After Maria's third shot had eliminated another threat, they had begun using the buildings and terrain more effectively, making it harder for her to get clean shots. But Maria had been doing this long enough to know that patience was often more valuable than speed. Through her scope, she could see the trapped American soldier more clearly now. He was definitely special operations, Navy SEAL, based on his gear and tactics. Even under extreme pressure, his movements were controlled and professional. But his situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Maria counted at least 8 enemy fighters still in the immediate area, and they were coordinating their movements in a way that suggested extensive training. The SEAL had managed to find better cover behind a collapsed section of stone wall, but Maria could tell from his body language that he was running low on ammunition. Every few seconds, he would expose himself just long enough to return fire, but his shots were becoming more selective, more carefully chosen. This was a warrior who knew how to conserve resources when survival was on the line. Maria's radio crackled again. Viper 1, this is Eagle's Nest. Can you confirm the status of the American personnel? Eagle's Nest, this is Viper 1. One American soldier, appears to be SEAL team leader, currently pinned down behind stone structure approximately 200 meters northeast of the main building cluster. He's alive and active but heavily outnumbered. I count 8 enemy combatants still in the immediate area. Copy that. Ground team is encountering resistance on their approach route. Estimated arrival time, now 6 to 7 minutes. Can you continue to provide support? Maria was already moving to another position as she responded. Affirmative, maintaining overwatch and engaging targets of opportunity. But as she settled into her new firing position, Maria realized that the situation was more complicated than she had initially understood. Through her scope, she could see that the enemy fighters weren't just random insurgents. They were wearing matching gear and moving with the kind of coordination that suggested they were part of an organized unit. This wasn't a chance encounter or even a simple ambush. This was a well-planned operation. More troubling was the fact that they seemed to be taking prisoners rather than simply eliminating threats. Several times, Maria had watched through her scope as enemy fighters moved in positions where they could have easily killed the trapped SEAL, but instead they seemed to be trying to force him to surrender. The realization hit her like a cold shock. This wasn't just about capturing or killing one American soldier. This was about taking a high-value prisoner, someone who possessed information that would be extremely valuable to enemy forces. The question was, how had they known that this particular SEAL would be in this particular place at this particular time? Maria pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the immediate tactical situation. Regardless of how this had happened, her job was clear. Keep that SEAL alive until reinforcements arrived. Everything else could be figured out later. Her fourth shot took out an enemy fighter who had been attempting to set up what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. The explosion of the RPG round could have easily killed the trapped American, so eliminating that threat had been Maria's top priority. But taking the shot had required her to expose herself more than she would have liked, and almost immediately she heard the distinctive crack of a bullet passing close to her position. There was another sniper out there. Maria's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. Not only was there an organized enemy unit down in the valley, but they had their own sniper providing overwatch. This changed the entire dynamic of the engagement. Now Maria wasn't just hunting, she was being hunted. Moving immediately, Maria began scanning the surrounding ridges and elevated positions, looking for any sign of the enemy sniper. Finding and eliminating that threat was now her absolute priority, because as long as that sniper was active, both she and the trapped SEAL were in mortal danger. The second shot from the enemy sniper confirmed Maria's worst fears. The bullet struck the rock face just inches from where her head had been moments before. This wasn't some inexperienced fighter with a hunting rifle. This was a trained marksman with quality equipment and the skill to use it effectively. Maria forced herself to think like her opponent. Where would she position herself if she were trying to provide overwatch for the operation down in the valley? The ridge line to the east offered good visibility, but would be difficult to reach quickly. The rocky outcropping to the north provided excellent concealment, but limited fields of fire. The most likely position was the elevated position to the southeast, good visibility, multiple escape routes, and natural camouflage. Using her scope, Maria began systematically searching the southeastern ridge. It was dangerous work, because every moment she spent looking for the enemy sniper was a moment when she wasn't providing support for the trapped SEAL. But she knew that if she didn't eliminate this threat soon, they would both be dead. There, a flash of reflected light, so brief that most people would have missed it entirely. But Maria had been trained to notice these tiny details, and she recognized the telltale glint of sunlight off a scope lens. The enemy sniper was approximately 800 meters away, positioned behind a cluster of boulders that provided excellent concealment. The shot would be challenging. Not only was it at near maximum effective range, but Maria would have to expose herself significantly in order to get the proper angle. And she would only get one chance. If she missed, the enemy sniper would immediately know her position and would have every advantage. Maria took a deep breath and settled into her firing position. Everything her father had taught her, everything she had learned in sniper school, every lesson from 3 tours of duty in combat zones, it all came down to this moment. The mathematics were complex: wind speed, distance, elevation, the slight tremor in her hand from adrenaline, the fact that her target was also a trained sniper who would be expecting exactly this kind of engagement. But as Maria lined up her shot, she thought about the SEAL pinned down in the valley below, about her brother who would be shipping out for basic training in 2 months, about all the soldiers who were counting on her to do her job professionally and effectively. The fear and uncertainty faded away, replaced by the cold clarity that had made her one of the most effective snipers in the United States military. The shot was perfect. Even at 800 meters, Maria could see through her scope as the enemy sniper jerked backward and then went completely still. The immediate threat was eliminated, but Maria knew that she had just announced her presence to every enemy fighter in the area. They would be looking for her now, and they would be coming. Eagle's Nest, this is Viper 1. Enemy sniper eliminated. Continuing overwatch for the American personnel. Outstanding work, Viper 1. Be advised, ground team has encountered heavier resistance than expected. New estimated arrival time is 8 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes might as well have been 10 hours. Maria could see that the enemy fighters in the valley were regrouping and preparing for a final assault on the SEAL's position. Without the overwatch from their sniper, they would be more vulnerable to Maria's fire, but they also knew that time was running out. Maria began engaging targets systematically, picking off enemy fighters one by one as they attempted to advance on the SEAL's position. Her shots were precise and deadly, each one eliminating a specific threat and forcing the remaining fighters to take cover. But there were still too many of them, and Maria was running low on ammunition herself. That's when something unexpected happened. The trapped SEAL suddenly broke from his defensive position and began moving aggressively toward the largest concentration of enemy fighters. It was either a brilliant tactical decision or a desperate last stand, but Maria realized that he was trying to create an opportunity for her to eliminate multiple targets while they were focused on his assault. It was incredibly risky. If Maria missed any of her shots, the SEAL would be completely exposed and almost certainly killed. But if she could provide accurate support during his assault, they might be able to turn the tide of the engagement just long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Maria began firing in rapid succession, her shots coordinated with the SEAL's movements to maximum effect. Enemy fighter after enemy fighter dropped as Maria provided precise sniper support for what was essentially a one-man assault on a fortified position. It was the kind of coordination that normally required extensive training and communication, but somehow Maria and the unknown SEAL were working together like they had been partners for years. The assault lasted less than 2 minutes, but when it was over, the immediate threat had been eliminated. The enemy fighters were either dead or had retreated to positions where they could no longer threaten the SEAL's position. Maria allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before beginning to scan for remaining threats. That's when she heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching from the east. The ground team was finally arriving, and they were bringing air support. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that the worst was over. Viper 1, this is Eagle's Nest. Outstanding work. Ground team is moving into position now. Maintain overwatch until the area is secure. Copy that. Viper 1 maintaining overwatch. As Maria watched through her scope, she saw the rescue helicopters land in the valley below. Heavily armed soldiers immediately began securing the area while a medical team moved toward the position where the SEAL had been trapped. Even from her distant position, Maria could see that he was walking under his own power, wounded but alive. The mission had been successful, but Maria knew that this was just the beginning. The questions about how an organized enemy unit had been waiting in exactly the right place at exactly the right time would need answers. The fact that they had been trying to take prisoners rather than simply eliminate threats suggested a level of intelligence and planning that was deeply troubling. But those were concerns for intelligence officers and mission planners. Maria's job had been to keep that seal alive long enough for rescue to arrive, and she had accomplished that mission. As she began collecting her gear and preparing to move to the extraction point, Maria reflected on how this engagement had been different from any other in her career. For the first time, she had been part of a truly collaborative effort with someone she had never met, never trained with, and never even spoken to. The coordination between her sniper support and the SEAL's assault had been instinctive and professional in a way that surprised even her. It suggested that both of them operated at a level where training and experience transcended the need for explicit communication. As Maria made her way carefully down from the ridgeline, she wondered if she would ever meet the SEAL whose life she had helped save. Military operations often ended with people going their separate ways without ever knowing the names or faces of the people who had made their survival possible. But something told Maria that this particular mission wasn't over yet. The questions about enemy intelligence and coordination were too important to ignore, and the fact that she had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to prevent a disaster seemed like more than simple coincidence. Whatever came next, Maria knew that this day had changed something fundamental about how she understood her role in the larger conflict. She wasn't just a sniper anymore. She was part of a complex network of professionals whose lives and careers intersected in ways that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The helicopter ride back to base camp gave her time to think about everything that had happened, but mostly Maria found herself wondering about the SEAL she had helped rescue. What kind of man charged a fortified position knowing that his survival depended entirely on the marksmanship skills of a sniper he had never met? The answer to that question might be more important than she realized. The base camp medical facility was buzzing with controlled activity when Maria arrived for her post-mission debriefing. As she walked through the corridors, she could hear fragments of conversation about the morning's operation. Words like unprecedented coordination and textbook rescue floated through the air, but Maria was more interested in getting her equipment cleaned and her report filed than in listening to praise. Colonel Martinez was waiting for her in the briefing room, along with two men she didn't recognize. One was obviously military. His bearing and the way he carried himself screamed special operations. The other man wore civilian clothes, but had the kind of alertness that suggested intelligence services. Staff Sergeant Santos, Colonel Martinez began, "I'd like you to meet Commander J. Thompson, the Navy SEAL you provided overwatch for this morning, and Agent David Shun from Defense Intelligence." Maria found herself shaking hands with the SEAL she had watched through her scope for the better part of 2 hours. Commander Thompson was younger than she had expected, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of quiet intensity that came from years of high-stakes operations. When he spoke, his voice carried the slight hoarseness of someone who had recently been shouting orders under combat conditions. "Staff Sergeant Santos," Thompson said, looking directly into her eyes, "I owe you my life. What you did out there today was nothing short of extraordinary." Maria felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I was just doing my job, sir. Anyone in my position would have done the same thing." Agent Chin spoke up for the first time. "Actually, Staff Sergeant, that's not entirely true. We've been analyzing the tactical situation from this morning, and what you accomplished was far beyond standard sniper protocol. The coordination between your fire support and Commander Thompson's assault was something we typically only see between units that have trained together extensively." Colonel Martinez gestured for everyone to sit down around the conference table. "That's actually why we're all here. This morning's operation has raised some important questions, and we need to understand exactly what happened out there." Commander Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "Staff Sergeant, I need to ask you something directly. When you were providing overwatch during my assault on the enemy position, how did you know exactly when and where to engage targets? I never communicated my intentions to you, and yet your fire support was perfectly timed. Maria thought about the question carefully before answering. Sir, I was watching your movements and trying to anticipate your tactical decisions based on your positioning and the enemy's responses. When you broke from your defensive position, it was clear that you were either making a desperate last stand or creating an opportunity for coordinated fire support. Given your professional approach to the engagement, I assumed it was the latter. Agent Shun was taking notes as she spoke. And how did you determine which targets to prioritize during the assault? Standard threat assessment, sir. I engaged targets in order of their ability to harm Commander Thompson, starting with those who had clear fields of fire on his approach route and working outward from there. Commander Thompson was nodding slowly. That's exactly right, but here's what's interesting. I was making those same threat assessments in real time, and your target selection matched my priorities exactly. It's like you were reading my mind. Colonel Martinez spread a tactical map on the table. Staff Sergeant, Agent Chun has some information about this morning's operation that might surprise you. David, Agent Chun looked up from his notes. Staff Sergeant Santos, what we're about to tell you is classified, but given your role in today's events, you need to know. Commander Thompson's team wasn't in that valley by accident. They were conducting a classified reconnaissance mission based on intelligence that suggested enemy forces were planning something significant in that area. The problem, Commander Thompson continued, is that the enemy was waiting for us. They knew we were coming, they knew our approximate numbers and capabilities, and they had prepared specifically for an engagement with a special operations team. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying there was a security breach? Agent Shin nodded grimly. That's one possibility. But there's another explanation that's even more troubling. We think the enemy deliberately leaked information about their activities in that area, knowing that it would trigger exactly the kind of response they were prepared for. A trap, Maria said quietly. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Agent Shin pointed to a spot on the map. Your position this morning wasn't part of the planned operation. You were supposed to be providing overwatch for a completely different mission that was scheduled for this afternoon. Colonel Martinez picked up the explanation. Due to a last-minute change in intelligence priorities, your afternoon mission was canceled, and you were reassigned to provide long-range reconnaissance for the valley area. If that change hadn't been made, Commander Thompson and his team would have been on their own when they walked into that ambush. The implications were staggering. Maria realized that a series of seemingly random decisions and changes had placed her in exactly the right position to prevent what could have been a catastrophic loss of American lives and classified information. Commander Thompson was studying her face carefully. Staff Sergeant, there's something else you need to know. During my time pinned down in that valley, I was monitoring enemy radio communications. They were talking about a sniper they called the Silent Death. They seemed to know about your reputation. My reputation? Agent Shin consulted his notes again. We've been tracking references to a mysterious sniper for the past 18 months. Enemy communications intercepts mention someone whose skills seem almost supernatural. The descriptions match your confirmed kills and tactical approaches exactly. Maria was struggling to process this information. But I've never operated in this specific area before today. No, but your reputation has spread throughout the insurgent networks. They've been trying to identify and locate you for months. In fact, we think that's part of why today's ambush was so well planned. They were hoping to encounter you. Commander Thompson leaned back in his chair, which means that when I broke cover for that final assault, I wasn't just counting on unnamed sniper support. I was counting on the legendary sniper that enemy forces have been talking about for over a year. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed the implications. Finally, Colonel Martinez spoke. Staff Sergeant Santos, we need to talk about your future assignments. Your skills and reputation have made you a high-value target for enemy forces, which creates both opportunities and risks. Agent Chen added, we'd like to discuss the possibility of expanded operations, missions that would take advantage of your unique capabilities and the psychological impact your reputation has on enemy forces. But Maria was thinking about something else entirely. Commander Thompson, When you made the decision to assault that position, you were essentially betting your life that I could provide accurate fire support. Why? Thompson smiled for the first time since they had been introduced. Because during the 2 hours I was pinned down in that valley, I watched you work. Every shot was perfect. Every target selection was exactly what I would have chosen. Every tactical decision showed the kind of judgment that only comes from extensive combat experience combined with natural ability. Plus, he continued, there was something else. During the most intense part of the engagement, when things were looking pretty hopeless, I heard enemy fighters shouting to each other. They were scared. These were hardened insurgent fighters who had planned and executed a sophisticated ambush, and they were genuinely frightened of a sniper they couldn't see and couldn't locate. Agent Shin looked up from his notes. That's actually part of what we want to discuss with you, Staff Sergeant. Your reputation has become a force multiplier. Enemy units are modifying their tactics and avoiding certain areas simply because they think you might be operating there. Maria realized that this conversation was heading toward an offer that would fundamentally change her military career. The question was whether she was ready for that kind of responsibility. What exactly are you proposing? Colonel Martinez exchanged glances with Agent Shun and Commander Thompson before answering. We want you to consider joining a joint task force that would specialize in high-value target elimination and psychological operations. Your role would be to conduct missions that take advantage of your reputation and skills, while also training other snipers to achieve similar levels of effectiveness. Commander Thompson added, and I'd like to request that you be assigned as the primary sniper support for my team's operations. What we accomplished today proved that we work well together, and, frankly, I can't think of anyone I'd rather have watching my back. Maria looked around the table at the three men who were essentially offering her a chance to become part of something much larger than routine sniper operations. It was flattering, exciting, and more than a little intimidating. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course, Colonel Martinez replied. But I will say this. What you did today saved not just Commander Thompson's life, but potentially prevented the loss of classified information that could have compromised ongoing operations throughout this entire theater. As the meeting broke up, Commander Thompson approached Maria privately. Staff Sergeant, I know this is a lot to consider, but I want you to know that working with professionals of your caliber is why I do this job. If you decide to join the task force, I guarantee you'll be making a difference in ways you can't even imagine right now. After everyone else had left, Maria found herself alone in the briefing room, staring at the tactical map and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 3 tours of duty, countless successful missions, and a reputation that had apparently spread far beyond her own awareness. All of it had culminated in a single morning that might define the rest of her military career. But mostly Maria found herself thinking about her father's advice from all those years ago in the Texas desert. He had told her that being a good shot meant knowing yourself and knowing your target better than they knew themselves. Today, she had learned that she had become something more than just a good shot. She had become a symbol of American military capability that struck fear into the hearts of enemy forces. The decision she made in the coming days would determine whether she embraced that role or continued with routine operations. Either way, Maria knew that this morning had changed everything. She was no longer just Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, sniper. She was the silent death, and with that reputation came both opportunities and obligations that she was only beginning to understand. As she walked back to her quarters to clean her equipment and write her mission report, Maria reflected on the strange twist of fate that had placed her in exactly the right position to save a Navy SEAL commander's life. Some might call it coincidence, others might call it destiny. Maria preferred to think of it as simply being prepared when the moment came to make a difference. Her father would have been proud, and her brother, shipping out for basic training in 2 months, would be serving in a military where legends like the Silent Death reminded enemy forces that American soldiers were capable of extraordinary things when the situation demanded it. The war in Afghanistan would continue, with all its complexities and uncertainties. But Today, at least, the good guys had won a significant victory. And Maria had played a crucial role in making that victory possible. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, Maria could go to sleep knowing that somewhere on base, Commander Jake Thompson was alive and safe because she had been exactly where she needed to be when it mattered most. In the end, that was what being a soldier was really about, being ready to do the right thing at the right time, regardless of the personal cost or recognition involved. Maria had proven today that she understood that responsibility at the highest level. Everything else was just details.